All right, welcome everybody. I had a great conversation with a couple of you on Zoom, but I wasn't able to record it, so I'm doing this again for a second time. So tonight is the lecture, or this week's lecture is on levels of strategy, and I will try to just share my perspective on this, and hopefully it's complementing the reading that you've taken a look at. In addition to talking about strategy, I'm also going to talk about course assignments, and I'll incorporate some of the feedback that I've already gotten about stuff also. So with respect to levels of strategy, 40 or so years ago, the approach to organization structure is really quite different than it is now. And it was clear then that an organization's goals and strategies determine structure. And when I think of strategy, I'm often thinking about its relationship to structure. That's what I'm going to share. And now, though, strategy is really another set of variables. And so in this talk, I'm going to share a little bit or review what I would characterize as the strategy imperative. An imperative dictates something. In our usage, that something is structure. So the early acceptance of goals and strategy as determinants of an organization's structure was founded on assumptions inherent in classical economic theory. And I talked a little bit about this in the first lecture. These include the organization has a goal or goals toward which it drives. It moves toward its goals in a rational manner. The organization exists to transform economic inputs to outputs, and the environment within which the organization operates is a given. So again, that's classical economic theory and organization theory thinking. And hopefully you also get that that's not really necessarily the case. But the consideration was that if those points were valid, an organizational structure can be interpreted as an outcome of rational processes. Drucker noted that structure is a means for attaining the objectives and goals of an institution. Any work on structure must therefore start with objectives and strategy. Notice that this approach takes a closed systems approach perspective. The environment is a given. And again, structure is seen as just a rational means by which inputs are translated to outputs. So what is strategy? Goals and strategy are often discussed as the same thing. However, for me, and many others really, they're interrelated, but they are not the same thing. Goals refer to ends. Strategy refers to both means and ends, the how and the what. As such, goals are part of an organization's structure. Mintzberg wrote in 72 and 94 in his book, The Rise and Fall of Strategic Planning, he talks quite a bit about these views of organizational goals, strategies, and as well planning. What is planning? Planning is the view that describes strategy. The planning mode of strategic thinking is the view that describes strategy as a plan for or explicit set of guidelines developed in advance. Managers identify where they want to go. Then they develop a systematic and structured plan to get there. Until recently, this viewpoint dominated the organization theory lit. Right, so that's this. Right, intended strategy, deliver strategy, realize strategy. Another perspective is what we can call an emergent or evolutionary mode. Strategy is not necessarily as well thought out and systematic as a plan. Rather, it evolves over time as a pattern in a stream of significant decisions. So for me, I actually prefer, so let me just give really two clear examples. You'll often hear some organizations write a 5-year strategic plan or even a 10-year strategic plan. So this is based on intended strategy and then a deliberate strategy that helps them get to realize strategy. I actually refer or recommend and work with organizations to create no more than a 3-year strategic plan with a budget that says this is what our budget should look like in 3 years. And these are both based on emergent strategies, right? So after a first year, We may have a vision for where we want to be 3 years out, but we know that our environment changes so much that we want to be able to say, what are the possible scenarios after the first year? And so based on these 3 scenarios, which decisions might we make on any of those scenarios? What things do we need to keep into consideration? And so that leads us to another set of strategies that we might need to develop, not as big as maybe a strategic planning process as a 5 or 10-year strategic planning process. But again, just for the year, what are the decision points we need to consider, really holding what it might look like 3 years out? So that's, again, the planning mode. So 1 being much more about emergent strategies as opposed to deliberate strategies. And even when we talk about strategies, we're really talking about 3 types of strategy: the corporate level strategy, the business level strategy, and a functional strategy. When we talk about corporate level, we're talking about our markets. Business level, we're talking about competition. And functional, we're talking about our structural specialization. As you can imagine, many organizations are in multiple businesses, therefore need to develop different strategies for different levels of activities. Again, that corporate level strategy seeks to answer the question like the type of business to compete in, the competitive position, the resource development. It also determines the roles that each business in the organization will play. The business level strategy seeks to compete in a particular market, how to achieve competitive advantage. And the functional level strategy seeks to answer the question, what are the action plans for each functional area? Research, sales, development. It is assumed that management will design structure to fit with the different strategies within the different levels. But let me lift it up even a little bit more. Now, when I work with organizations, I'm also having them think about sustainability, but not just the sustainability of their organization, really the sustainability of our community, right? And when we're talking about sustainability, I'm hoping that we're creating strategic priorities that are in harmony with our environment rather than having mastery over our environment or people even. That really what I'm talking about is sustainability with respect to how do we fit within our natural environment and to what extent are we contributing to healthy communities, as well as not just our own economic vitality, but the vitality of our communities. And many don't think that way, right? So this is one of my principles and values that play out. So I actually push organizations to think, what are your community considerations, as well as your organizational considerations, as well as your programmatic considerations. But let me now get back to the 3 levels of strategy that we'll focus on in this course. The corporate level strategy, again, is answering the question, what set of businesses should we be in? Corporate vision, corporate objectives and resource allocation, corporate growth strategies, as well as business unit composition is what we're talking about. I'm going to go back and forth between thinking about your organization that you're doing your PLP with and thinking about yourself. For example, reflecting upon your personal mission statement, what set of businesses should you be in personally? Sometimes the work for you in this course is checking out the alignment between what you do and who you are, and what your organization does and who they are. I often have worked with boards when I work on board development. I'm actually having board members create a personal mission statement and checking its alignment with the organizational one. And if the alignment is desirable, feasible, viable, and meaningful, I say you're at the right place in terms of being a board director. Or even, you can even ask that about staff. You're at the right place if you feel like there's some alignment between who you are and what you do as a person and who your organization is and what they do for the community. When we're talking about business level strategy, so again, going back to corporate level strategy, what you're answering for yourself is what are the set of businesses should you be in? If you decide, if you're not talking about your organization, but your own personal mission and your own, some of you might be going towards consulting, right? So what kind of consulting might I be in? Some of it might be around healthcare personally. What kind of healthcare am I talking about? Personally, to get that aligned with the organization that you might want to be a part of. When we talk about business level strategy, there's a lot of research on the strategy structure relationship used to narrowly focus on the degree of product diversification. Oftentimes we simply say form follows function. That is, our structures are based on what we're doing. Now there are those who examine structure and system to say that their purposes are, or to say what their purposes are, right? That is, function follows form. Now, a richer and more complete analysis of the content of corporate strategies has developed. While these four dimensions are not assumed to depict comprehensively all the complex aspects of strategy, they do encompass the dimensions of strategic content that have received the most attention. So I want to talk a little bit about this matrix that identifies competitive advantage and competitive scope. When we talk about innovation, for example, we're answering the question, to what degree does an organization introduce major new products or services, right? To what extent is their uniqueness, their differentiation? An innovation strategy does not mean a strategy merely for simple or cosmetic changes from previous offerings, but rather one for meaningful and unique innovations. Not all firms actually pursue innovation. It might be more appropriate for 3M or Apple, but not necessarily pursued by Reader's Digest, right? Or some Home Digest magazines. When we talk about market differentiation, right, the competitive scope and competitive advantage in terms of market, this strategy strives to create customer loyalty by uniquely meeting particular needs. An organization seeks to create a favorable image for its product through advertising, market segmentation, and prestige pricing. This describes strategy used by premium beer producers, for example, and designer label apparel manufacturers. When we talk about breadth, the competitive scope, this strategy refers to the scope of the market to which the business caters, the variety of customers, their geographic range, and the number of products. Some grocery chains, for example, have chosen to operate only in a given community. Others have extended their operations to regional, national, or even international level. When we talk about cost control in particular, this strategy considers the extent to which the organization tightly controls its costs, refrains from incurring unnecessary innovation or even marketing expenses, and cuts prices in selling a basic product. Walmart is an example of that. When we talk about functional level strategy, we're answering the question, how do we coordinate and strengthen our resources? So we're answering really four questions. When we talk about mechanistic structure and organic structure, we're answering the question, what are the effects of authority and power? When we talk about mechanistic, we're much more formal as an organizational structure. And when we're talking about organic, really more informal, being able to adapt. When we talk about tall organization or a flat organization, we're answering the question, how are our activities being coordinated? Are they differentiated or are they integrated? Right? When we talk about differentiation, we want to be really a flatter organization, allow for the different ways that people do things across the organization. Integration is where it's much more taller, right? It's a clear line of how activities will be coordinated. And related to that is how are decisions being made, or really more specifically, who makes the decisions? Are they centralized, being that it's really about the top directors and managers, or are they decentralized in that we're allowing decisions to be made even at the front line? And then when we're talking about standardization and mutual adjustment, we're really answering the question, how are we monitoring employee activities, right? So one of the ways to monitor it is by having standardized job descriptions. So everybody with the same title has pretty much the same job description, regardless of where they are in the organization. But one that's monitoring by mutual adjustment, it may be fewer or more job descriptions and more about bullets. What are the basic things that they may be responsible for? So for example, an administrative assistant in research and development might have a different job description than an administrative assistant in sales. I wanted to highlight some key strategy and structure folks, given that I'm the nerdy theorist that I am. But just through history, right, there are a few. Alfred Chandler is one who really talked about how structure follows strategy, right? as opposed to form follows structure, where he studied 100 of the United States' largest business firms and concluded that structure follows the strategy. While there is considerable support for this thesis, the limitations of his research were clear because he had really not a good definition of strategy, and the organizations he looked at were only profit-making organizations, didn't include public sector or even nonprofits in his research, and he restricted any. So I think his research should be restricted from making any wide generalization of his findings. The contemporary strategy structure theory seems to come from Raymond Miles and Charles Snow, and they offered a 4-category strategy structure typology that allowed for 4 specific structural predictions. They classified organizations based on rate at which they change their products or markets. And the 4 that they named were defenders. And these were folks who seek stability by producing limited set of products. The second kind of structure, prospectors, like 3M. Their strength is finding and exploiting new products and marketing opportunities. Then there are the analyzers, and that includes IBM or Caterpillar, where they capitalize on being the best of defenders and prospectors. And then the 4th type, are the reactors, a residual strategy meant to describe the inconsistent and unstable patterns that arise when one of the other 3 strategies is pursued improperly. Analysis of major firms in the tobacco industry confirmed this typology's predictive capability. Michael Porter proposed that organizations can pursue one of 4 strategies, and his are similar to the ones I described in the previous slide. One strategy is cost leadership, that they can decide they could be the cost leaders, like Gallo Wine, or it's low cost, Hyundai. We're not going to be the most expensive. We're going to be a leader in the kinds of cars we offer at a cost range, right? Differentiation, Toyota, right? They differentiate themselves of being reliable compared to other car companies. Or Haagen-Dazs, based on their ingredients. That's what distinguishes their ice cream from other people. The third kind of strategy pursuit, is focus. Stouffer's lean cuisine is an example of that, where there's a lot of frozen food, but they focus their frozen food on being healthy and lean. And then there's the 4th kind of strategy, which is called stuck in the middle. Their strategy isn't to be the best. It may be just be okay. Snapple is a perfect example of that one, where a few years ago, actually probably 10 years ago now, their strategy was we're third, after Coca-Cola and Pepsi. They weren't trying to be the best beverage drink in the market. They're okay with being third. And then specific structural predictions could be made for the first 2 strategies. Finally, there's Danny Miller. He introduced a strategy framework composed of 4 dimensions: innovation, marketing differentiation, breadth, and cost control. And that integrates, again, the work of Chandler, Miles and Snow, as well as Porter. There are other considerations for the strategy-structure relationship, and there were even attacks on the strategy imperative. And those attacks were mostly these 3, that managerial discretion over changes of strategy may be considerably less than suggested. That really was the environment that affected changes in strategy. 2, where competition is low, the lag may make the interaction between strategy and structure appear almost unrelated, so they may not even be there. And then 3rd, structure may determine strategy rather than vice versa. When we talk about the industry-structure relationship, it seems that the industry in which organizations operate is just as important a factor influencing strategy and hence structure. Industries differ in terms of growth possibilities, regulatory constraints, barriers to entry, and so forth. Most firms within a given industry share these characteristics. And so the result is that these firms within a strategy industry category tend to have similar organizational structures. So, for example, many hospitals have the same organizational structure. Many technology firms have the same organizational structure. Many law firms have the same organizational structure. Many universities have the same organizational structure. Again, so their strategies and structure relationship is less about, or while it is influenced by strategy and structure, it's also significantly influenced by this industry. And then I showed this slide in the first lecture. Again, there are 5 elements to developing a strategic plan, and you can see them here. And really, it's answering questions around who are we now by determining the domain, the business or businesses that we're participating in, present, or in terms of 4 things, right? Product scope, integration, geographic coverage, and differential advantage. Product scope is a range of products or services, right? Like the auto industry. And the step 2 is really trying to identify the environmental opportunities. It's connected to 2 and 3. And asking what are the political, social, and economic trends that might be influencing us? What are the market trends? And what are the product and or technology changes that we can anticipate? And who are our competitors? That's the strategic forecast. Step 3 then analyzes the organization's operational, financial, and managerial strengths. What are our competitive edges? And then in order to identify and develop alternatives, it really requires analyzing each of those strengths and weaknesses in light of the opportunities and the threats. And then step 5 identifies setting specific objectives. And once the strategy has been identified, it is quantified in terms of goals, such as obtain a 20% share of soft drink market within 5 years, and double advertising expenditures each year for the next 3 years. And within these specific goals are targets. Short-term plans can be developed that specify how the goals will be attained and what each department must do to contribute to that attainment. So I want to shift focus a little bit in terms of I assigned 3 chapters. And really it's along the lines of where you're landing with respect to your PLP, this course and the strategic plan that you're taking on. Are you taking on a corporate level strategy? If so, read chapter 8. If you're taking on a chapter of business level strategy, if so, read chapter 5. And if you're taking on a business functional level strategy, then chapter 6 will help you. I encourage you to read or scan and skim all 3, but really you'll find support for whatever level of strategy that you're working on from one of these 3 chapters. And if you're working on a personal or professional strategic plan and forecasting, then really it's the same kind of thing. You can still draw from all 3 levels, or you can focus on one or a combination thereof. So going forward, you'll notice that I've already added onto the Canvas a strategy worksheet. And due April 9th is the task 1, which is where you identify your first level of strategy and explain why you're focusing on that. Again, if it's a corporate level, business level, functional level, or even personal/professional, or a combination thereof. And there's some questions there in the worksheet that you'll be asked to respond to that will help in the discussions. You'll also notice that I'm asking you to upload your signature assignment from LDRS 321. I understand that these aren't all graded yet from Professor Malloy, Rich Malloy, and that's fine. I don't need a perfected copy. I just would like to see what you did in the previous course because I'm not going to portfolio it quite yet. But I just wanted to see what were you thinking and what were you analyzing. And I'm not looking at it for the purposes of grading. I'm just looking at it for the purposes of how can we use that work to support task 2, which is your SWOT analysis due April 16th. But I'm also going to ask you in the discussion, or maybe it's in the quiz, what did you gain from the class? And it's not really a critique in terms of how it was taught or what were the assignments, but really what are your current competencies around data-driven leadership at this point? And not assuming that you're already super duper strong in every area, but really thinking what is it that where you are competent, feeling good, and where you might need to develop. And then I want to be able to know that to support you. And then also in the strategy worksheet, you'll notice we'll talk more about strategic priorities. And we're actually going to talk about SWOT analysis next week and strategic priorities the following week, as well as capability assessments and pipelines. So some of these will be getting more worksheets to help you complete the strategy worksheet along the way. And then notice the last 3 tasks will be incorporated into your outline due May 7th, which is, just to quickly review the course, you've already completed a few discussions. You'll notice that all discussions are 15% of your grade, and I've kind of aligned them with points. So there are 5 discussions that you'll be having in the course of 8 weeks. And so I've just assigned 3 points to each of them. And really 2 are based on the prompts, and 1 is based on your response to colleagues. The goal achievement is connected to your reflection paper. I asked you to respond to what would make this course worthwhile and what's your contribution to making it worthwhile. That should have been in your reflection paper or answered in another email. And then your reflection paper. There will be a quiz that's released tomorrow or Monday that's worth 10 points, so 10% of your grade. And then I'm also going to offer pretty soon some calendar times where we can ask some one-on-ones during the week of April 10th that I'm going to encourage you to sign up with. Again, it's optional. It's not mandatory. We can do that via Skype, Zoom, or just on the phone. And the strategy worksheet is worth 15% of your grade, and you'll see really that it's really completing the work. It's really better done than perfect, is what I'm really looking forward to. And then all of that work really contributes to the success of your strategic plan outline. And next week, or maybe in the week after, I'll give you some sample strategic plans as well as strategic planning outlines so that you can complete that work pretty easily. And then I will also offer, if anybody wants, during the week of May 1st, what I call leader clinics, where we can schedule a time where you can ask for help from each other. And I'll facilitate a protocol that I call a tuning protocol, where you'll share what you've done so far, and then you'll get feedback on how to make it stronger. And if anybody's interested, just let me know. And then the final assignment is the video presentation, due May 12th. And again, I'll be giving tips all along the way on how to complete that. And just to kind of be clear, the video presentation, what you will do is send me a YouTube link. So you will need to record it and get it onto YouTube and just send me that link. And then after I grade it, you'll be able to know that that's your signature assignment that you can upload onto Portfolio. The strategic planning outline is the other signature assignment out of this course. And I will ask you to email that to me or just add it to the Canvas as a document, like you've done with the reflection paper. Many of you did with the reflection paper. And I will grade it. Then after I've graded and given feedback on it, then you can, again, save that onto Portfolio as another signature assignment coming out of this class. So the 2 main signature assignments of this class are the strategic plan outline and the video presentation. And when I first taught it, I was going to actually just have folks create a 15 to 20 page or strategic plan. And I realized that was more work than you would be able to do within an 8-week period. And so that's why it's been modified to create a strategic plan. And then a brief video presentation, which I think takes less time than actually writing a 15-page paper, a strategic plan. So that's where we are with the course. If you have any questions, I'm always reachable. Hopefully it's also gotten clearer that I've started cleaning up the assignments. So again, the signature assignments will be the strategic plan outline and video presentation. I would ask you to get those to me first. Let me grade them before you add them onto Portfolio. And then if there are any other critical or technical needs that you have for the course, let me know, and hopefully you find my response rate pretty quick. All right, thank you very much. Take care.